Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, we're going to insert data into our little mini database we made. So we already have this users table, and let's say we want to insert new users into this table. So how would you do that? In the very first video, video 0, I showed you a few ways I did that, but let me explain kind of all the ways you can insert data. Now, MySQL can make some assumptions for you. And one of those ones is if you say insert into, which is a statement you'd use for inserting data, users, you can just say values. Okay. In this case, you see the structure of our database. This table here, values, and you can say 1, Mike. Oh, wow. Mike and Smith. What MySQL is going to assume is that because you didn't put a definition of what you're inserting in, that this here is going to match up with this here. So it puts 1 here, Mike here, and Smith here. Does that make sense? Now, what if you want to insert only 1 or 2 rows? Well, if you try to do that, or 1 or 2 fields, if you try to do that without defining what you're putting in, MySQL is not going to know whether to put this here, here, or here. So let's try that, and we'll see it'll say column count doesn't match value count. So the amount of columns you have doesn't match the amount of volumes you have. So how do you do that? Well, you provide a parenthesis before the users, and you would say something like, in this case, let's say we want to enter that into the first. So we would insert that in. Now MySQL is going to, what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, it's going to match this field here with this value here. Okay, it's going to take the default value here for last, and the ID is auto incrementing, so it's just going to assume, oh, okay, you probably want the next value. So what does that look like in the database? Let's start from users. You'll see it says, okay, well, I assume since it's an auto incrementing field, I'll just assume the next value, and then Mike obviously goes into the first column here. And then I'll put null into this last because that's the default value for last. Now, alternatively, if you wanted to, when you created your table up here, you could say something like default, and then let's say you wanted to have 456 as your default value. Well, there you go. And actually, I think in one of the so it depends on what version of MySQL you have. I think that's a valid way of doing default too. You probably should look that up just to be sure. Okay, but be aware that that's available to you. Okay, so now that we know how to insert data into a table, how do you remove the table? Well, that comes in to, actually, let's go over the documentation for insert real quick. So insert, you can search the insert documentation. It'll tell you how to insert data. So insert, some of the options you have here. You can look up what those do for you. A table, and then the values here, and then the, values, yeah, and then the parenthesis of what you're putting in. And this will explain in great detail, as you say, there's a lot of detail here, how you can insert into tables. So here's the most basic way of doing it that you saw. Well, the most basic way was the initial way, but this is kind of the most common way of inserting data in a terminal. And you can see you can insert in multiple rows here, which is pretty cool. So you can define what fields you're inserting into, or columns, and then multiple columns. So for example, you could do something like insert into users, say first, and then we can say values, and say John, comma, Mary, comma, and say Jane, semicolon, and then we can go here, and you'll see it inserts those 3 in. Okay, so there's kind of different ways you can insert. And then removing, you use the delete statement here. So in delete statement, you can have a where statement attached to the end to decide what you're deleting. Okay, we haven't quite gotten into a where statement yet, but we'll do a very basic rundown here. Okay, so let's just say Mary. We don't want Mary in the database anymore. So we can say delete from users where ID equals 4. What SQL will do is it'll look at the users table, find a column that matches this value here, and it'll also find the value of that column matching this part here. So say delete from users where ID equals 4. We'll select again, and we'll see Mary's gone. The where statement, you can do all sorts of conditionals. You say delete from users where ID equals 5 and first is equal to Mike. And we'll see 0 rows removed because the 5th row, even though it matched the ID 5, it didn't match this side as well. The first name wasn't a Mike. So it decided, okay, well, that doesn't match this query, so I'm not going to remove any rows. And also, it will also remove multiple rows as well. So if you say delete from users where ID is greater than 2, okay, it's going to match all the users rows that match that ID. So we'll select again, and we'll see that the John and the Jane row are removed because their ID was greater than 2. The where statement's pretty powerful. We'll get more into the where statement and when we get into the select statement, because obviously querying data, you want to grab data very specifically, and that will be how we handle it. Okay, well, I hope in this video it was informative, and if you enjoyed it, please like this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.